Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm gonna be reacting to a video called How the Netherlands Helped America Gain Independence and how it cost them. Well, I didn't know that the Netherlands had such an active participation in the independence process that, I don't know, they can rub it against, to people. I don't know, but let's check it out and comment, like, and subscribe.
This isn't a history channel, but as English explorer Captain John Smith once wrote, geography without history seemeth a carcass without motion. But before I get into the story I'm about to tell, if you are new to the channel, welcome. On this channel, I talk about a variety of geography-related topics on whatever I'm interested in at the moment. I have quite a few history videos planned for this summer, such as What's Left of the Dutch in New York City, a lot of old map videos, and a few on America's attempts at exterminating their wildlife.
Yes, awful.
So if these are topics that interest you as well, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell if you want to get notifications on new uploads. Now let's go ahead and get started. If you know more than a little about the American Revolution, you know that France played an important role in America's victory for independence by providing money, men, and material. But there is another lesser-known contributor to the United States victory, the Netherlands. Its official name at the time was the Republic of the Seven United Netherlands, also commonly known as the Dutch Republic. This is the predecessor state of modern-day Netherlands, though at the time this also included parts of modern-day Belgium. Now, the Netherlands wasn't officially an ally of the United States, nor did they support the United States with soldiers, both of which probably contributes to why they are often forgotten.
Sure.
Great Britain actually saw the Netherlands as an ally of theirs at the beginning of the revolution.
Oh, really?
But the Netherlands officially declared themselves neutral.
I'm gonna guess they gave the money.
In the war. What the Netherlands was more interested in than a U.S. victory was making money. And they weren't too concerned with who they were making the money from. But by the end of the war, the United States and the Dutch
equal opportunities, which great.
Republic would have a common enemy. This is how the Dutch would support the war effort: trade. Before I go further, let me first provide some context. At the time of the American Revolution, though slowly declining in power by the 18th century, the Netherlands was a global leader in trade, controlling territories across the globe and a worldwide network of seafaring trade routes. Historians and economists debate on what exactly drove this small nation of only about 16,000 square miles or 42,000 square kilometers to become such a power.
It's incredible.
But historically, the Netherlands have accepted a high number of immigrants, which often brought with them skills and capital that could be reinvested.
Probably, again, they didn't care as long as you brought the money.
The country's inhabitants have also historically had a hard work ethic that emphasizes efficiency, which many historians say is rooted in its Calvinist past. But its rise to becoming a great seafaring nation is also rooted in the Netherlands' physical geography. This is a coastal country, lies extremely low in elevation, and is essentially one giant river delta, which has made it prone to flooding. I actually made a whole video on how the Dutch have adapted to its geography. If you want to check that out, I've left a link in the comments below. Water and the terrain shaped by it is why the country rides bikes, grows tulips, and has hundreds of windmills. But water didn't
when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade.
Just shape culture within its mainland borders. The physical geography, combined with the aforementioned cultural characteristics of the Netherlands, turned the Dutch into expert and efficient shipbuilders, and motivated its population to seek trade opportunities across the globe. And one of those places was the 13 colonies. Tensions began rising in the American colonies following the French and Indian War in 1763. The British launched a series of acts that raised taxes on the colonists in order to pay for the war, because the British felt that the colonists caused the war, so they should provide payment for the protection that Great Britain had provided. The colonists weren't happy about it. Protests erupted, and in 1770, British soldiers opened fire on a mob of angry colonists, killing at least 5 men and wounding several more, in what is known as the Boston Massacre. Then in December of 1773, a band of Bostonians, dressed as Mohawk Indians, in protest on the taxation, boarded British ships and dumped 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor. The event is known as the Boston Tea Party. The British Parliament responded with what the colonists refer to as the...
I think obviously you're laughing now, but it's kind of ridiculous. It was taxes, it was tea. It's
Intolerable Acts. This brought Massachusetts under full control of the British government, and allowed British loyalists in the colony to be tried in Great Britain. George Washington called this the Murder Act, because he said it allowed British officials to harass colonists and then flee to Great Britain to escape justice. The act also allowed British soldiers to be housed wherever necessary, including private homes. though some historians say the act only meant unoccupied buildings. Great Britain had attempted to isolate extremists in Massachusetts with these acts, but it backfired, and other colonies pledged to support Massachusetts if there was an attack by the British. The colonists prepared for war. The British, for obvious reasons,
Yes.
refused to sell arms and ammunition to the American colonists, and they banned other countries from doing so as well. In 1774,
Oh,
Britain declared the
Netherlands did it?
export of war materials to the colonies to be illegal, and therefore subject to search and seizure. And this is where the Dutch enter the picture.
Yes,
because
I can see it.
the Dutch didn't care.
Yeah.
Dutch merchants continued to trade wherever and whenever possible.
the
The
money.
British Lieutenant Governor
They're following the money.
of New York warned London in November of 1774 that contraband between this place and Holland prevails to an enormous degree. Actions must be taken against the smugglers, but it would not be easy. The vessels from Holland or St. Eustatia do not come into this port, but in the numerous bays and creeks that our coasts and rivers furnish, on which the contraband is sent up through small boats. The British were furious that the Dutch continued to ignore the ban. They then made a strong request to the Netherlands to stop all war materials from being shipped to the American colonies.
Who's gonna
Penalties
stop
included
me?
confiscation of materials, large fines, and the confiscation of ships if not paid. Conscious of not being able to go head-to-head with the British Navy, the British had 100 warships compared to the Netherlands' 11. The government of the Netherlands officially decided to comply. But the Dutch merchant class wasn't happy with their government's decision, and they
Yeah.
just continued to ignore the British request. So the British then responded with more search and seizures around St. Eustatius, the hub for this arms and ammunition trade. Once the
What
war
was
had
there?
officially begun with the battles of Lexington and Concord in April of 1775, the Dutch ammunition trade to the Americans got so bad that King
Wait, that's in the middle of the Caribbean, right? What? Where is this? Santo Domingo, Haiti.
George
Okay.
III in January 1776 ordered more warships on duty around the Caribbean. He stated, "Every intelligence confirms that principally St. Eustatius, but also all the other islands, are to furnish the Americans with gunpowder this winter." But many of the Dutch traders continued to find ways to evade the British. More obstacles arose with the defeat of the Americans at Long Island, which left America completely without the ports of New York and later Philadelphia. Though the two largest ports were occupied by the British, the Dutch were again not a group to give up on this lucrative trade. And
That's
they
crazy.
continued smuggling through smaller ports and estuaries. In 1776, the Dutch Republic made a half-hearted effort to comply with the continued requests from the British. They replaced St. Eustatius governor with a new man, named Johannes de Graaf. After the British complained that his predecessor was allowing merchants to continue to ship war materials to the Americans.
Okay.
But on the 16th of
That's for
November
nothing.
1776, the American Navy ship USS Andrew Doria, with the American Declaration of Independence on board, arrived in St. Eustatius. Its captain fired a salute to the Dutch flag on Fort Orange, and the governor, Johannes de Graaf, decided to answer the salute with 11 gunshots. And so the United States of America were for the first time recognized as a nation by another.
Wow.
So now, not only were the Dutch preventing the Americans from running out of ammunition, allowing the revolution to continue, they had now recognized the British
Yeah.
colony as a sovereign nation.
They're
On top
actively
of
doing
this,
it.
the Netherlands was actually supposed to have provided 6,000 troops to the British for the war, as was the terms of a past treaty. In 1778, when France was persuaded to join in the fight against the British, the Dutch traded with them as well. But with the French, they traded mostly naval stores. The French needed supplies for their naval construction, but were unable to obtain them themselves due to the blockade of the Royal Navy. So they turned to the Dutch, who were privileged by a concession obtained after their victory in the Second Anglo-Dutch War, known as the principle of free ship, free goods,
Oh
which was
my.
enshrined in the Anglo-Dutch Commercial Treaty of 1668. According to the treaty, naval stores were not considered contraband, as long as the Dutch remained neutral, which the Dutch claimed they were. But
Sure.
of course, the British just
Neutral.
declared naval stores illegal and started arresting Dutch ships. And as always, Dutch merchants continued to evade the British. The Dutch-British relationship became more hostile on the 31st of December 1779 when the two countries had a brief naval engagement. The British wished to inspect Dutch ships for what they considered contraband destined for France. The Dutch initially refused and threatened the British with
course.
force, before finally backing down.
Oh.
The event caused the Dutch to pursue joining the League of Armed Neutrality, which was an alliance of European naval powers which was intended to protect neutral shipping against the Royal Navy's wartime policy of unlimited searches. The British government saw this move as a threat, and it could potentially embroil Great Britain in a war with its other members, Russia, Sweden, and Denmark-Norway. They had finally had enough. Great Britain officially declared war on the Dutch Republic, and they began attacking their former allies' colonial economic interests, including St. Eustatius, in what was known as the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War. One head-to-head naval battle did take place, the Battle of Dogger Bank. Both sides took hundreds of casualties. Tactically, the battle was a draw, but it was a strategic victory for the British. The Dutch did not have the naval strength to continue going head-to-head with the British.
That's insane.
This allowed
to
the
me.
British to continue their
Well, they're both sort of global naval power, so maybe it makes
oppression
sense.
against the Dutch merchants. Though the Dutch colonial empire had already been slowly declining, this settled it, and cemented Great Britain as the new leading commercial power. Though the Netherlands' economic self-interests were a large motivator for the support of the American Revolution, Dutch citizens, probably more so than the Dutch government, became more sympathetic to the American cause as the war progressed. Both countries were being bullied by the same global power.
Oh, of
And
course.
some sympathy may have come from the Netherlands having fought for their own independence in the 16th and 17th centuries. Whatever the motivation was, the United States will always be grateful for their support. Historian Barbara Tuchman claims that it's possible that the American Revolution would not have survived without the Dutch ignoring the ban on war materials and successfully evading the British. On February 27, 1939, President Franklin D. Roosevelt presented a plaque to St. Eustatius. Mounted on the flagpole inside Fort Orange, it reads, "In commemoration of the salute to the flag of the United States, fired in this fort on 16 November 1776, by order of Johannes de Graaf, Governor of St. Eustatius, in reply to a national gun salute fired by the U.S. brig of war Andrew Doria. Here, the sovereignty of the United States was first formally acknowledged to a national vessel by a foreign official."
I didn't know that. That's insane.
If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more geography videos. Thank you for watching.
Yeah, this was incredibly interesting. I was thinking of it was one historian that apparently said, oh, if it hadn't been for the Netherlands' involvement in this, the American Revolution wouldn't have, well, it would have existed, but probably wouldn't have been successful. And, you know, it's going around, it's kind of crazy, yes, but it's more insane to me that you don't really get to see. I think, obviously I didn't know, so I didn't really know how big of the influence of that Dutch influence and how important it was. So yeah, it's great to have videos like this because they really do exemplify how sort of things that you may, again, they're little things that you don't really think about, but oh yeah, if it hadn't been for that particular sort of set of circumstances, then, you know, history and our lives would be very different from as we know, right? But you know, it's kind of crazy because you're thinking of, well, the great motivator, and I know I was just thinking about, you know, there were times of, you know, that time period, there were times of great war, and, you know, there was constantly wars happening, battles happening. There was a lot of conflicts. But I was thinking, well, if you were the Netherlands, how would I don't know if I would have acted, you know, differently. I do not know. Obviously, you have to put yourself in someone else's shoes, and it would be quite hard. Obviously, you don't really know the exact set of circumstances, but it would be, I don't know, it's crazy, obviously, that they hang around as long as they did, and they, you know, again, because you're thinking about the British, right? You're thinking about Great Britain. And I'm thinking, you know, the Dutch would probably be the natural ally for the British, just because, again, they're closer to each other. They're I don't know. Just by proximity sakes, I would assume, oh yeah, of course, you know, if I'm Great Britain and I'm thinking, hey, you guys, and we've done business before, I'm thinking, hey, your guys are going to be on our side, right? Because, you know, look at what these people are doing. That's unacceptable. But I like the idea they're trying to maintain neutrality, you know, the Netherlands in general. They were trying to maintain neutrality because it's funny that they were all, the main motivator was money. It was all about the money. And it's, yes, I mean, I get it because I know, now you think I've learned enough about the Netherlands to be, yes, they're very practical people, you know, they're very pragmatic, they're not thinking, they're probably not going to be swayed by, you know, more emotional kind of things, or just, no, because they're polite and whatever. No, it was more about money, and it was about, you know, for the sake of money, which, again, that's how the Netherlands became the Netherlands. You don't really become the Netherlands, and especially, I think, considering they're such a small country, you know, well, again, maybe at that point in time, they were, I think, probably a little bit bigger, right? Because there were parts of Belgium that belonged to the Netherlands or whatever, boundaries have changed than what was the Netherlands back in those days. And again, what it is now, because I think the mentality hasn't changed that much, is about, again, you don't really become the Netherlands with the set of circumstances that they were dealt with, as in you would think they're disadvantaged compared to other countries and other territories, but they managed to become this global huge superpower, and they have been a global superpower for so many hundreds of years. And you don't really get to become that, I think, by not being pragmatic and by thinking sort of things with a cold shoulder and with a head upon your body, and just thinking about things in a cold way, in a pragmatic way, and in a more resourceful way. So of course they made it so as of, no, we're going to be neutral. I think, for the time period, we're going to be neutral. We're not going to, again, technically we're not on anyone's side. So no, Great Britain, we're not going to technically help you. We're not going to be on your side of this conflict. But however, because again, money is the main motivator, is what matters, they're going to be following the money. So although technically I like the idea of they're playing whatever, it's sort of, this business doesn't really, it doesn't really pertain to me. You guys are doing your own thing. You guys are fighting over whatever. I don't really care. As long as I'm in business, good, right? Whatever. Well, that sounds also a really good point. I think obviously wars are awful. They're awful now. They were awful back then. Wars are terrible. But if one thing, it's also wars are expensive, and wars, make some people earn a lot of money. They make people very rich. So of course, I'm thinking, probably the Netherlands saw this as an opportunity, situation, as in maybe we can grow a little bit of this. Because again, even though the moral part of you says, obviously wars are terrible, because a lot of people, have a really hard time. A lot of people die, a lot of people see their lives destroyed and all of that. But I think if you're, again, that's the moral part and you're thinking as a person. But if you're thinking as a country itself, and all the rich merchants and all of those people, they were not thinking about, poor people, the little person that's there is going to be affected by this. They were thinking, no, wars make people rich. So they're thinking, no, it's great. Yeah, sure. Let's work with them. Let's keep contrabanding guns and gunpowder and whatever it is that they need. Because again, we like money basically. And everyone's thinking about their own interest as well. And of course you can blame them. I think it's something that, again, the moral aspect of things, maybe, think about, the moral aspect of things. I think it's easy, again, and it's in theory, you can obviously go, and obviously you're going to choose the right side and the right thing, when you're thinking about morality and all of that. But when it comes to the actual practice, and when you're actually you have to deal with real life situations, I think that's where the morals go a little bit, it gets a little sketchy, because what would you have done in your place? Obviously everyone, again, is all very nice as to, think about the other person, think about the people, think about this emerging country. But probably, again, when they're thinking about things in a practical way, no, because they're not going to, they're not going to sing with them. It's no, we want the money, we need the money. Because again, apparently they were also declining, the ship part and the naval part was declining, and they have to think about things in a more things that actually involve me, and I have to think about my future basically. So I think, yes, it's you can see it as, obviously for the United States, it's sort of great, good for you, love the Netherlands. Probably, Great Britain, it's a little bit less enchanted by them. I know historically probably people don't care anymore. This happened 250, 300 years ago. Of course, it's sort of whatever, bridge over troubled water, who cares, whatever. But again, for the United States, it's sort of, yeah, well, great, but everyone has to think about their own interest. And yeah, probably the British have gotten over this by now. But it never ceases to be funny to me. Yeah, we're the other allies, whatever, you're going to be an ally. And it's funny as well. At one point, they also, afterwards, after it was the British sort of were getting on their heels and being all, hey, you guys have to stop. We know that you're contrabanding this and whatever. And then when they actually got into the fight, like they started, they did the whole with the ship, and they opened fire and all of that. It's, yeah, well, one minute, I think in countries in general, and I think maybe in this day and age, you think about this in a bit of a different, so you have a different perspective, because it's not as if people are not that trigger happy, because you're not going to set a war, you're not going to create a battle, you're not going to create a mountain out of a molehill. But again, it's sort of back in those days, the littlest of things could set people off, and that you're blinked that we are at war with someone else. But it's funny that again you can see it and historically, and I think this happens probably even right now. It's obviously you're not going to war because of small things, and now, well, probably back in those days, people went to war. Oh, maybe again, I understand the stakes were a little bit different just because the world was different. But it's 1 minute you are an ally to someone, and then you blink, and then you're at war with them, and that cycle is going to continue throughout centuries and throughout years. It's you never know. They're the enemy now, but who knows? Maybe in 50 years they're going to be your greatest ally. So it's funny that you're thinking again, if you're thinking about people as you're thinking about countries as people, it's sort of, you're a little bit of a frenemy and they're your enemy, but who knows, maybe at one point they're going to be your friend. And again, when you're thinking about it like this, as in, you're seeing videos of historical things that have happened, it's kind of funny to think about things as, they were allies, but then back in at one point they were also enemies. They were allies, and then they also broke up, and then they got back together. It's sort of a couple that constantly breaks up and then gets together, breaks up, gets together. It's sort of like that. But yeah, it's funny just to think about this in as if they were people. But the obviously the other thing is that I think maybe in schools, obviously they don't really teach you that much. Well, of course they do, but I think the involvement of the Netherlands, I think, gets a little bit lost in the shuffle. And I understand maybe why. Yes, of course, it's a huge thing. It's a huge process to cover. Obviously, you don't get to, you're not going to become an expert just because of that. But I do think, well, maybe the Netherlands should be a little bit more recognizable as, they should give them a little bit more credit. Just because, again, and I understand for the reasons that I just mentioned, they were after the money, so it wasn't this noble cause that they were helping them. But they were helping the people there of the United States, and yes, because we want to, because we are familiar with their plight. No, I mean, apparently at one point maybe it was, but I think that was more maybe the people that were, yes, I'm going to have some sympathy for you because I know I've been in your shoes. I know how it feels to gain independence, which is another thing that I think I know that I do. I tend to forget a lot that, of course, the Netherlands also had to gain independence. I think it was from Spain at one point, and I don't know if from France, but I tend to forget about it because it's sort of, oh my God, the Netherlands has always seemed such a great sort of country that is kind of crazy to think, they also have an independence, which at one point in history. But I was thinking about that the whole, yes, there's this huge amount of ground to cover, and it gets a little bit lost in the shuffle of how important the Netherlands actually was. And even if it hadn't been for them, and again, they're following the money, but however it is, you don't really care about how you get there. You only care about, the result, which was, hey, they provided the guns, they provided, the gunpowder, and they provided everything. And probably another nation and probably another country wouldn't have had, I think, the bravery maybe to do it. So yes, it was because of the money. They had their own reasons, but probably some other countries would have backed out a little bit earlier, because again, Great Britain was again also a global superpower. So I think, standing up to Great Britain back in those days and be, hey, no, I'm going to continue to supply things to these people that they're trying to gain independence from you. I mean, that would have taken, I think, a lot of bravery. So it's crazy that, yes, they managed to do it. And probably, they do deserve a little bit more credit because it gets a little bit lost. And not a lot of people are familiar with the importance that they had and the role they played, all those years ago. And yes, it was kind of crazy, again, to think about. It would be a fun little exercise to think of, what would have happened if they hadn't really done that. Who knows? Maybe they, the U.S. would have lost, maybe, or maybe not. Maybe they wouldn't have lost, but the colonies and all that. But who knows? Maybe if things would have gone up really different, and probably they would have affected us, our normal daily lives, because again, the Netherlands wouldn't have gotten involved. So crazy. But that's it for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.